Welcome to Jersey Reads the Classics, an audiobook podcast delving into the finest works of our literary masters. Unfortunately, it's read by this woman.
What the hell? Who cares? Let's go on an adventure.
Hello, and welcome back to Jersey Reads the Classics with me, your host, Rosie D. Candia. So, without any further ado, we're going to move on to the next chapter, because you know, I don't do chapter recaps here. So, let's get back to Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, and we're moving on to chapter 3. Chapter 3, Come Away, Come Away. For a moment after Mr. and Mrs. Darling left the house, the night lights by the beds of the three children continued to burn clearly. They were awfully nice little night lights, and one cannot help wishing that they could have kept awake to see Peter. But Wendy's light blinked and gave such a yawn that the other two yawned also, and before they could close their mouths, all the three went out. Not gonna lie, I had a night light in my house in Jersey. I'm not gonna lie, always needed a night light. Yeah, up until I was probably like 40. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, now I like completely dark, but as a kid, I don't know, I always felt like someone was watching me. You know that song, Somebody's Watching Me? I always thought that. A little creepy. I know. I guess I was a creepy kid. There was another light in the room now, 1,000 times brighter than the night lights, and in the time we have taken to say this, it had been in all the drawers in the nursery looking for Peter's shadow, rummaged through the wardrobe and turned every pocket inside out. It was not really a light. It made this light by flashing about so quickly, but when it came to rest for a second, you saw it was a fairy, no longer than your hand, but still growing. It was a girl called Tinkerbell, exquisitely gowned in a skeleton leaf, cut low and square, through which her figure could be seen to the best advantage. She was slightly inclined to embonpoint. All right, this is a French word, E-M-B-O-N-P-O-I-N-T. Obviously, in English, we'd say embonpoint, but it's embonpoint. I don't speak French, remember? And this is like the cleavage, the fleshy part of the bosom, as you see right here. This is your physical description. So I guess she was scantily clad. Okay. A moment after the fairy's entrance, the window was blown open by the breathing of little stars, and Peter dropped in. He had carried Tinkerbell part of the way, and his hand was still messy with the fairy dust. Tinkerbell, he called softly, after making sure the children were asleep. Tink, where are you? She was in a jug for the moment, and liking it extremely. She had never been in a jug before. Well, with her jugs, she was sitting in a jug. And who doesn't like a jug? And that's what I'm going to leave on that. Okay. Oh, do come out of that jug and tell me, do you know where they put my shadow? The loveliest tinkle as of golden bells answered him. It is the fairy language. You ordinary children can never hear it. But if you were to hear it, you would know that you had heard it once before. Ooh, I hear bells. I can hear the bells. Tink said that the shadow was in the big box. She meant the chest of drawers. The chest of drawers, hello. And Peter, where am I going with this? I don't know why I'm all about the jugs today, because of embonpoint. I gotta let that go. She meant the chest of drawers, and Peter jumped at the drawers, scattering their contents to the floor with both hands, as kings toss halfpence to the crowd. In a moment, he had recovered his shadow, and in his delight, he forgot that he had shut Tinkerbell up in the drawer. If he thought at all, but I don't believe he ever thought, it was that he and his shadow, when brought near each other, would join like drops of water, and when they did not, he was appalled. He tried to stick it on with soap from the bathroom, but that also failed. A shudder passed through Peter, and he sat on the floor and cried. Sounds a little bit like Alice. Remember when she sat on the floor and cried? First off, I do want to mention about shadow. It's just interesting how his shadow, he's trying to stick the shadow back on because he misses his shadow. And a lot of people don't like to talk about their dark shadows, and they're doing their shadow work, which is the stuff of us that we don't really like to address. But I will talk about that in the woo-woo section. Anyway, he's crying on the floor. Oy vey, here we go. His sobs woke Wendy, and she sat up in bed. She was not alarmed to see a stranger crying on the nursery floor. She was only pleasantly interested. Okay, there's a stranger on the floor crying, and she's not alarmed? What's up with these kids? Obviously, she knows who it is, but still. Anyway, okay. Boy, she said courteously, why are you crying? Peter could be exceeding polite also, having learned the grand manner at fairy ceremonies, and he rose and bowed to her beautifully. She was much pleased and bowed beautifully to him from the bed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Wendy Moira Angela Darling," she replied with some satisfaction. "What is your name?" "Peter Pan." She was already sure that he must be Peter, but it did seem a comparatively short name. "Is that all?" "Yes," he said rather sharply. He felt for the first time that it was a shortish name. "I'm sorry," said Wendy Moira Angela. "It doesn't matter," Peter gulped. She asked where he lived. "Second to the right," said Peter, "and then straight on till morning." "What a funny address." Peter had a sinking. For the first time he felt that perhaps it was a funny address. "No, it isn't," he said. "I mean," Wendy said nicely, remembering that she was hostess. "Is that what they put on the letters?" He wished she had not mentioned letters. "Don't get any letters," he said contemptuously. "But your mother gets letters." "Don't have a mother," he said. Not only had he no mother, but he had not the slightest desire to have one. He thought them very overrated persons. Wendy, however, felt at once that she was in the presence of a tragedy. Oh God, we know that Wendy is that woman that's just a caretaker who just wants to be the fixer. Really quickly about the long name, the Wendy Moira Angela Darling. I'm an Italian girl, we all know this, and my parents are from Italy. You would think I have 3, 4, 5 names. I don't. They never gave us middle names. My name is Rosanna DeCandia. That's it. And then I picked a confirmation name, which is Valerie, because I had a crush on Valerie Bertinelli, and there is a St. Valerie. So Valerie Bertinelli, I've always had a crush on you. I still think you're amazingly gorgeous. But yeah, I didn't get no long-ass name. Whatever. I'm not bitter. I'm letting it go. But Wendy, what's up with you worrying about him being a tragedy? She's going to be the fixer. The fixer. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. "Oh, Peter, no wonder you were crying," she said, and got out of bed and ran to him. "I told you. I wasn't crying about mothers," he said rather indignantly. "I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, I wasn't crying. Denial, denial, denial is a river in Egypt." So old, but I don't care. I'm going to say it. "It has come off?" "Yes." Then Wendy saw the shadow on the floor, looking so draggled, and she was frightfully sorry for Peter. "How awful," she said, but she could not help smiling when she saw that he had been trying to stick it on with the soap. How exactly like a boy. Fortunately, she knew at once what to do. "It must be sewn on," she said, just a little patronizingly. "What's sewn?" he asked. "You're dreadfully ignorant." "No, I'm not." But she was exulting in his ignorance. "I shall sew it on for you, my little man," she said, though he was as tall as herself, and she got out her housewife and sewed the shadow onto Peter's foot. I wouldn't have known to sew the shadow onto him, and secondly, I don't know how to sew. I mean, once in a blue moon if I have to do like a little button, but let me tell you, in my day we took home economics, home ec, and it was like 1 semester of cooking, 1 semester of sewing. I sucked at it. I suck at anything that's domestic. I'm not gonna lie. I'm good with the hair, the makeup, the fashion and shit, but I'm terrible with anything with the house. It's not my thing. But remember, we focus on the things that we're good at, and we just say about the things we're not so good at. All right, it's all right. We move on. We don't need to dwell on that shit. I'll tell you that much, okay? "I dare say it will hurt a little," she warned him. "Oh, I shan't cry," said Peter, who was already of the opinion that he had never cried in his life. And he clenched his teeth and did not cry, and soon his shadow was behaving properly, though still a little creased. "Perhaps I should have ironed it," Wendy said thoughtfully, but Peter, boy-like, was indifferent to appearances, and he was now jumping about in the wildest glee. Alas, he had already forgotten that he owed his bliss to Wendy. He thought he had attached the shadow to himself. "How clever I am!" he crowed rapturously. "Oh, the cleverness of me!" Okay, who does this sound like, people? It sounds like Wendy's got hot stuff for someone who's like a father, huh? Can't say thank you, is not giving her any credit, but he's taking all that and he's crowing rapturously. Okay, Peter, whatever, but let's see how Wendy reacts. Is she going to be as kind as Mrs. Darling? I don't know. It is humiliating to have to confess that this conceit of Peter was one of his most fascinating qualities. To put it with brutal frankness, there never was a cockier boy. But for the moment, Wendy was shocked. "You conceit!" she exclaimed with frightful sarcasm. "Of course I did nothing." "You did a little," Peter said carelessly, and continued to dance. A little, she replied with hauteur. If I am no use, I can at least withdraw. And she sprang in the most dignified way into bed and covered her face with the blankets. Okay, I like this. Wendy's sticking up for herself. And the word she uses, hauteur, or hauteur, H-A-U-T-E-U-R. It's another French word, and that's how I think it's said. Don't know if it's right, but I know it's just kind of like. Anyway, I like that she spoke up for herself, and she's like, bitch, you ain't getting away with this. I did all the work. I mean, he's still trying to be like, well, you did a little, but I love it, because you know what? She ain't pulling the Mrs. Darling on him. Wendy's like, no, bitch, no, I'm calling you out. Good for you. Good on you, Wendy. She reminds me a little bit of Alice. I like it a lot. To induce her to look up, he pretended to be going away. And when this failed, he sat on the end of a bed and tapped it gently with his foot. Wendy, he said, don't withdraw. I can't help crowing, Wendy, when I'm pleased with myself. Still, she would not look up, though she was listening eagerly. Smart girl, don't we all do that? We pay attention to everything. You may not think we are, but we are. Wendy, he continued in a voice that no woman has ever yet been able to resist. Wendy, one girl is more use than 20 boys. Now, Wendy was every inch a woman, though there were not very many inches, and she peeped out of the bedclothes. Do you really think so, Peter? Yes, I do. I think it's perfectly sweet of you, she declared, and I'll get up again. And she sat with him on the side of the bed. She also said she would give him a kiss if he liked. But Peter did not know what she meant, and he held out his hand expectantly. Okay, so Peter has smooth talked her, a little manipulative. Wendy bought into it. Okay, girl. And now she wants me giving him a kiss. Okay, but he don't know what a kiss is. But of course he's sitting there waiting for it. Oh, he's waiting for it. Oh, we're going to stop for a moment because now we're hearing helicopters. This is the moment, my final hour. This is what you get when you live in a city. There's always helicopters or planes or sirens and shit going on. But hey, that's the price you pay if you want to walk around town and not have to be stuck in suburbia. I digress. Surely you know what a kiss is, she asked aghast. I shall know when you give it to me, he replied stiffly. And not to hurt his feelings, she gave him a thimble. Now, said he, shall I give you a kiss? And she replied with a slight primness. If you please. She made herself rather cheap. Really? By inclining her face toward him, but he merely dropped an acorn button into her hand. So she slowly returned her face to where it had been before, and she said nicely that she would wear his kiss on the chain around her neck. It was lucky that she did put it on that chain, for it was afterwards to save her life. Look at it. I love how they said she put herself like cheaply because she was expecting a kiss. How could she expect him to kiss someone who doesn't know what a kiss is? So I'm kind of confused by that. But then, of course, there's a dig about her being cheap because she put her lips out there herself out to him. She's what, 12, 13, and she's being cheap? She's not being cheap. Ridiculous, I said. When people in our set are introduced, it is customary for them to ask each other's age. And so Wendy, who always liked to do the correct thing, asked Peter how old he was. It's not really a happy question to ask him. It was like an examination paper that asks grammar when what you want to be asked is Kings of England. I don't know, he replied uneasily, but I am quite young. He really knew nothing about it. He had merely suspicions, but he said at a venture, Wendy, I ran away the day I was born. Wendy was quite surprised, but interested, and she indicated in the charming drawing-room manner, by a touch on her nightgown, that he could sit nearer her. Oh, was she being cheap again, J.M. Barrie? It was because I heard father and mother, he explained in a low voice, talking about what I was to be when I became a man. He was extraordinarily agitated now. I don't want to ever be a man, he said with passion. I want always to be a little boy and have fun. So I ran away to Kensington Gardens and lived a long, long time among the fairies. She gave him a look of the most intense admiration, and he thought it was because he had run away. But it was really because he knew fairies. Wendy had lived such a home life that to know fairies struck her as quite delightful. I'd like to meet a fairy. I do believe in fairies. I think those little bastards move things around when you can't find it. They always say, and if you believe in fairies, they will take things. And you put it somewhere, like something in a drawer, and then 5 seconds later or a day later it ain't there. It's because the fairies are fucking with you. I'm just telling you right now. All right, whatever. She poured out questions about them to his surprise, for they were rather a nuisance to him, getting in his way and so on, and indeed he sometimes had to give them a little hiding. Still, he liked them on the whole, and he told her about the beginning of fairies. You see, Wendy, when the first baby laughed for the first time, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and they all went skipping about, and that was the beginning of fairies. Tiddy has talked this, but being a stay-at-home, she liked it. And so, he went on good-naturedly. There ought to be one fairy for every boy and girl. Ought to be? Isn't there? No. You see, children know such a lot now. They soon don't believe in fairies. And every time a child says, I don't believe in fairies, there is a fairy somewhere that falls down dead. Really, he thought that they had now talked enough about fairies. And it struck him that Tinker Bell was keeping very quiet. I can't think where she has gone to, he said, rising, and he called Tink by name. Wendy's heart went flutter with a sudden thrill. Peter, she cried, clutching him, you don't mean to tell me that there is a fairy in this room. She was here just now, he said a little impatiently. You don't hear her, do you? And they both listened. The only sound I hear, said Wendy, is like a tinkle of bells. Well, that's Tink. That's the fairy language. I think I hear her too. The sound came from the chest of drawers, and Peter made a merry face. No one could ever look quite so merry as Peter, and the loveliest of gurgles was his laugh. He had his first laugh, still. That's sweet. Wendy, he whispered gleefully, I do believe I shut her up in the drawer. He let poor Tink out of the drawer, and she flew about the nursery screaming with fury. You shouldn't say such things, Peter retorted. Of course I'm very sorry, but how could I know you were in the drawer? Wendy was not listening to him. Oh, Peter, she cried, if she would only stand still and let me see her. They hardly ever stand still, he said. But for one moment, Wendy saw the romantic figure come to rest on the cuckoo clock. Oh, the lovely, she cried, though Tink's face was still distorted with passion. Tink, said Peter amiably, this lady says she wishes you were her fairy. Tinker Bell answered insolently. What does she say, Peter? He had to translate. She is not very polite. She says you are a great ugly girl and that she is my fairy. He tried to argue with Tink. You know you can't be my fairy, Tink, because I am a gentleman and you are a lady. To this, Tink replied in these words, yes, silly ass, and disappeared into the bathroom. She is quite a common fairy, Peter explained apologetically. She's called Tinker Bell because she mends the pots and kettles. Oh my God, Tinker Bell is a sassy, fiery little biatch. You go, girl, you silly ass. That's hysterical. I guess in those days, I guess it wasn't considered a cuss word because this book is for children, but that's hysterical. I'm loving Tinker Bell's little sassiness right now. Okay. They were together in the armchair by this time, and Wendy plied him with more questions. If you don't live in Kensington Gardens now, well, sometimes I do still. But where do you live mostly now? With the Lost Boys. Who are they? They are the children who fall out of their perambulators when the nurse is looking the other way. If they are not claimed in 7 days, they are sent far away to the Neverland to defray expenses. I'm captain. What fun it must be. Yes, said cunning Peter, but we are rather lonely. You see, we have no female companionship. He's reeling her in. Are none of the others girls? Here we go. The trap has been set. Let's see where we're going with this. Oh, no. Girls, you know, are much too clever to fall out of their prams. This flattered Wendy immensely. Here he goes with the sweet talk. I think, she said, it is perfectly lovely the way you talk about girls. John there just despises us. For reply, Peter rose and kicked John out of bed, blankets and all. One kick. This seemed to Wendy rather forward for a first meeting, and she told him with spirit that he was not captain in her house. Good for you, Wendy. However, John continued to sleep so placidly on the floor that she allowed him to remain there. And I know you meant to be kind, she said, relenting, so you may give me a kiss. For the moment, she had forgotten his ignorance about kisses. Man, this girl really wants to get some from Peter. She hot for Peter. Hot for Peter! Hot for Peter! I thought you would want it back, he said a little bitterly, and offered to return her the thimble. Oh, dear, said the nice Wendy. I don't mean a kiss, I mean a thimble. What's that? It's like this. She kissed him. And then she kissed me. Funny, said Peter gravely. Now shall I give you a thimble? If you wish to, said Wendy, keeping her head erect this time. Oh, yeah, she's not acting cheaply now. Now he's going to go to her. Okay, yeah, I like it. Peter thimbled her, and almost immediately she screeched, What is it, Wendy? It was exactly as if someone were pulling my hair. That must have been Tink. I never knew her so naughty before. And indeed, Tink was darting about again, using offensive language. She's my kind of girl. I think I would be Tink in this story. She says she will do that to you, Wendy, every time I give you a thimble. But why? Why, Tink? Again, Tink replied, You silly ass. Peter could not understand why, but Wendy understood, and she was just slightly disappointed when he admitted that he came to the nursery window not to see her, but to listen to stories. Okay. Tinkerbell, sassy, the jealousy, but do you see how girls don't stick together? So she's taking it out on Wendy instead of frickin' pinching Peter for doing something like that. And plus, Tinkerbell, be realistic. You're this big, okay? He's a human form. He's not gonna snag you or shag you or snog you, whatever they say. I think it's snog when you kiss. So you just need to get over it, girl. But oh my God, Tinkerbell. And I love that she has offensive language. Well, I know he's not going to go into details of that, but that would be me. I'd be Tinkerbell. I don't know if I'd be pulling Wendy's hair, but then again, I'm not a fairy of tinks and pots or whatever. Okay. You see, I don't know any stories. None of the Lost Boys know any stories. How perfectly awful, Wendy said. Do you know, Peter asked, why swallows build in the eaves of houses? It is to listen to the stories. Oh, Wendy, your mother was telling you such a lovely story. What story was it? About the prince who couldn't find the lady who wore the glass slipper. We all know what that story is, Cinderella. Peter, said Wendy excitedly, that was Cinderella, and he found her, and they lived happily ever after. Peter was so glad that he rose from the floor where they had been sitting and hurried to the window. Where are you going? She cried with misgiving. To tell the other boys. Oh, don't go, Peter, she entreated. I know such lots of stories. Those were her precise words, so there can be no denying that it was she who first tempted him. Okay, I call bullshit on that. She tempted him. He has been playing her this whole time, and he wants stories. He's been reeling her in, and now all of a sudden, Wendy is considered the temptress. You know, what is this? Adam and Eve? Once again, like Eve tempted Adam with the friggin' apple. You know, this is what I don't understand. Why is it always the woman that's the tempter? I mean, Adam could have made a choice. If he didn't think with his penis, and if he didn't think with his dick, that's why they call them dickheads, he wouldn't have gone for it, okay? He could have said, no, I don't want that damn apple. But he did. That's on you, Adam. And it's on you too, Peter, whatever happens next. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Hello. Okay. He came back, and there was a greedy look in his eyes now, which ought to have alarmed her, but did not. Oh, the stories I could tell to the boys, she cried, and then Peter gripped her and began to draw her toward the window. Let me go, she ordered him. Wendy, do come with me and tell the other boys. Of course, she was very pleased to be asked, but she said, oh dear, I can't. Think of Mummy. Besides, I can't fly. I'll teach you. Oh, how lovely to fly. I'll teach you how to jump on the wind's back, and then away we go. Ooh, she exclaimed rapturously. Wendy, when you are sleeping in your silly bed, you might be flying about with me saying funny things to the stars. Ooh, and Wendy, there are mermaids. Mermaids with tails? Such long tails. Oh, cried Wendy, to see a mermaid. He had become frightfully cunning. Wendy, he said, how we should all respect you. Look at that. Peter is just going in for the juggler. They even use the words cunning. She's the temptress. She's just innocent and sweet. He's been cunning and manipulative from the get-go. But I like where it's going, of course. Hello. She was wriggling her body in distress. It was quite as if she were trying to remain on the nursery floor. But he had no pity for her. Wendy, he said, the sly one, you could tuck us in at night. Ooh, none of us has ever been tucked in at night. Ooh, and her arms went out to him. And you could darn our clothes and make pockets for us. None of us has any pockets. How could she resist? Of course, he wants her to be the friggin' nursemaid. How could she resist? The girl darning their socks or whatever, giving them pockets. I'll give you a pocket full of shit. Whatever. How could she resist? Of course, it's awfully fascinating, she cried. Peter, would you teach John and Michael to fly too? If you like, he said indifferently. And she ran at John and Michael and shook them. Wake up, she cried. Peter Pan has come, and he is to teach us to fly. John rubbed his eyes. Then I shall get up, he said. Of course he was on the floor already. Hello, he said. I am up. Michael was up by this time, also looking as sharp as a knife with 6 blades and a saw. But Peter suddenly signed silence. Their faces assumed the awful craftiness of children listening for sounds from the grown-up world. All was as still as salt. Then everything was right. No, stop. Everything was wrong. Nana, who had been barking distressfully all evening, was quiet now. It was her silence they had heard. Out with the light! Hi! Quick! Cried John, taking command for the only time throughout the whole adventure. And thus, when Liza entered, holding Nana, the nursery seemed quite its old self, very dark, and you would have sworn you heard its 3 wicked inmates breathing angelically as they slept. They were really doing it artfully from behind the window curtains. Liza was in a bad temper, for she was mixing the Christmas puddings in the kitchen and had been drawn from them, with a raisin still on her cheek, by Nana's absurd suspicions. She thought the best way of getting a little quiet was to take Nana to the nursery for a moment, but in custody, of course. There, you suspicious brute, she said, not sorry that Nana was in disgrace. See, poor Nana, everybody's picking on her, and she's the only one that's going with the gut and is giving warning. All of them are going to pay. They're all going to pay. Nana's the best nursemaid ever. They are perfectly safe, aren't they? Every one of the little angels sound asleep in bed. Listen to the gentle breathing. Here, Michael, encouraged by his success, breathed so loudly that they were nearly detected. Nana knew that kind of breathing, and she tried to drag herself out of Liza's clutches, but Liza was dense. No more of it, Nana, she said sternly, pulling her out of the room. I warn you, if you bark again, I shall go straight for Master and Mrs. and bring them home from the party, and then, oh, won't Master whip you just. She tied the unhappy dog up again. But do you think Nana ceased to bark? Bring Master and Mrs. home from the party. Why, that was just what she wanted. Do you think she cared whether she was whipped so long as the charges were safe? Unfortunately, Liza returned to her puddings, and Nana, seeing that no help would come from her, strained and strained at the chain until at last she broke it. In another moment, she had burst into the dining room of 27 and flung up her paws to heaven, her most expressive way of making a communication. Mr. and Mrs. Darling knew at once that something terrible was happening in their nursery, and without a goodbye to their hostess, they rushed into the street. Oh, suddenly now they know. They see, look at this. Friggin' Liza's another jackwad, doesn't listen to Nana, and Nana's got to go through all this trouble just to tell them shit's going down in the nursery. Shit's going down, but only Nana knows. But it was now 10 minutes since 3 scoundrels had been breathing behind the curtains, and Peter Pan can do a great deal in 10 minutes. We now return to the nursery. It's all right, John announced, emerging from his hiding place. I say, Peter, can you really fly? Instead of troubling to answer him, Peter flew around the room, taking the mantelpiece on the way. How topping, said John and Michael. How sweet, cried Wendy. Yes, I'm sweet. Oh, I am sweet, said Peter, forgetting his manners again. Of course, that cocky bastard. It looked delightfully easy, and they tried it first from the floor and then from the beds, but they always went down instead of up. I say, how do you do it? Asked John, rubbing his knee. He was quite a practical boy. You just think lovely, wonderful thoughts, Peter explained, and they lift you up in the air. He showed them again. You're so nippy at it, John said. Couldn't you do it very slowly once? Peter did it both slowly and quickly. I've got it now, Wendy, cried John, but soon he found he had not. Not one of them could fly an inch, though even Michael was in words of 2 syllables, and Peter did not know A from Z. Of course, Peter had been trifling with them, for no one can fly unless the fairy dust has been blown on him. Fortunately, as we have mentioned, one of his hands was messy with it, and he blew some on each of them with the most superb results. Now, just wiggle your shoulders this way, he said, and let go. Let it go! Let it go! They were all on their beds, and gallant Michael let go first. He did not quite mean to let go, but he did it, and immediately he was borne across the room. I flew, he screamed while still in midair. John let go and met Wendy near the bathroom. Oh, lovely! How ripping! Look at me! Look at me! Look at me! They were not nearly so elegant as Peter. They could not help kicking a little, but their heads were bobbing against the ceiling, and there was almost nothing so delicious as that. Peter gave Wendy a hand at first, but had to desist. Tink was so indignant. Up and down they went, and round and round. Heavenly was Wendy's word. I say, cried John, why shouldn't we all go out? Of course. It was to this that Peter had been luring them. Michael was ready. He wanted to see how long it took him to do 1,000,000,000 miles, but Wendy hesitated. Mermaids, said Peter again. Ooh, and there are pirates. Pirates, cried John, seizing his Sunday hat. Let us go at once. It was just at this moment that Mr. and Mrs. Darling hurried with Nana out of 27. They ran into the middle of the street to look up at the nursery window. And yes, it was still shut, but the room was ablaze with light. And most heart-gripping sight of all, they could see in the shadow, on the curtain, 3 little figures in night attire circling round and round, not on the floor, but in the air. Not 3 figures, 4. In a tremble, they opened the street door, but Mr. Darling would have rushed upstairs, but Mrs. Darling signed him to go softly. She even tried to make her heart go softly. Will they reach the nursery in time? If so, how delightful for them, and we shall all breathe a sigh of relief. But there will be no story. On the other hand, if they are not in time, I solemnly promise that it will all come right in the end. Oh, I love that. We always love happy endings. They would have reached the nursery in time had it not been that the little stars were watching them. Once again, the stars blew the window open, and that smallest star of all called out, "Cave, Peter!" Then Peter knew that there was not a moment to lose. "Come," he cried imperiously, and soared out at once into the night, followed by John and Michael and Wendy. Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana rushed into the nursery too late. The birds were flown. Oh my God. Oh my God. Picture if you can see it. I think this is the original drawings. Mr. and Mrs. Darling crying, and Nana, the one they should always listen to at the window, looking at the 3 little birds that have flown away. Wow. All I'm going to say is, I've made my snarky comments. The fact that poor Wendy's getting blamed for being the temptress at first. But Peter is cunning and manipulative. Hence, he's always going into their window and, I think, listening to their stories and what have you. I don't think he means any harm. But, he's got his needs too. He's a little boy. Anyway. So, what can we glean from this? First, I want to talk about, which I did not talk about in last chapter because I think they talked about it more here, was the shadow. All right, so let's talk about shadow. All right, and when people talk about shadow in the woo-woo world, we're talking about the dark part of yourself, the human part of yourself, or the ugly things that you don't like to talk about, or the unhealed parts of yourself that no one likes to talk about. But this is important, my friends. First and foremost, if you're journaling, think about the parts of yourself that have not been healed yet, or the parts of yourself that make you human, and not in judgment way. Write those things down and think about the things that right now you feel that you can confront. I think especially now that a lot of people have time to go within and really think about their journey, who they are, their existence, and their purpose here. It's amazing to do shadow work. It's not always the prettiest, but I will say this. It gets darkest before the dawn. That's a fact in anything in life. And when you do shadow work, which is the part of you that you accept, like Peter embraced it, he loved it. That was part of who he is. And we are shadow. It's like yin and yang. It's like light and dark. We need good and evil. It's a balance of things. So having your shadow is important. It's what makes you human. It's the things that you need to heal because that also makes you human and helps you evolve. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is think about, or if you're journaling, think about the things that you don't like to normally think about yourselves without judgment. Just shed some light on that shadow part and do the work and think about what's triggering you and things that trigger unhealed parts of you, and then work on those parts and address it and where this started, like from childhood or what have you. And then also the things that are human of you, and not to judge it anymore, because I've said this before, when you judge something or have guilt about and shame about something, it stays there and you make it more worse than the situation really needs to be. So your shadow is something that you should embrace. It's part of who you are and it's part of your journey. So I'm going to encourage you to just look at your shadows, and if there are things that are really unhealed that you need to right now work on, I will encourage you to take the time and the love for yourself and heal those part of you and just do the work. And let me tell you something, it may seem rough at first, but when you come out of it, you come out like you're just blazing and happy. It's just like going down a dark tunnel, right? You're in a tunnel and you're stuck, but when you come out of the tunnel, there's this big bright light. It's the same thing with doing shadow work. And I think it's also a beautiful part of our healing and our journey as a human being. So please look at your shadow side without judgment, but with love and light, and look at it and heal it. And I think this would be a great time for that. Next, I think it's also about being very much in the present. Of course, we know children stay in the present. We discussed this during our last book. And I think it's important for all of us not to get caught up in the future and the past, because we can't control those things. And when I think about this book, how Wendy, of course, she was thinking about her mother and other aspects of it. The other two just wanted to go. But Wendy decided to go, and they're all being in the present. And in the present allows them to go on this adventure, to take the leap of faith. And I think with anything right now, in terms of anything in your life, the leap of faith is what I glean from that. we have things that we want to do. We've been so afraid to do because we feel like, well, I don't have, I don't know if that's going to appear. But the whole thing about life is we don't know anything that's going to happen. Even things that you think are guaranteed, they're never freaking guaranteed. Because let me tell you something. The road that you think you're supposed to take and the thing you're supposed to do 9 times out of 10, if it's in your ego, it's not for you to do. There's something else for you. But if you leap and take that leap of faith, the net does appear. You know that story, that saying, leap and the net will appear. Same thing with your life. If you are really passionate about something and there's something that you really want to do and you've been sitting on the fence because you're living in your ego and you're living in fear and anxiety and not trusting yourself and trusting in yourself, this is also the same lesson. You never take that leap of faith, and then you don't know where that's going to give you, where lead you. I mean, that's the whole thing about life, is taking leaps and faith and leaps and faith and bound out into your glory. Because you know what? It's never easy to have that much faith, but those who do, they come out on the other side and they're always so grateful they took the leap, because they're like, I cannot imagine my life differently. And we don't want to have regrets about the things that we did not do. People sit there and they talk about they regret the things they didn't take a chance. Most athletes talk about they failed so many thousands of times before they got to where they needed to be. And so many people, a lot of people do emulate athletes because they put a lot of time and work. They didn't come out of the womb playing basketball like Michael Jordan or, God rest his soul, Kobe Bryant. They worked really hard, and they also took the leap of faith. So I'm going to encourage you right now to think about the things again that have been sitting there. They're brewing, and you want to do it, but you're sitting in your fear. So I want you right now to think about, just throw the fear aside. And if you had no fear, you could be guaranteed success in something you are fearing right now. What would that be? Yes. Think about it. Write about it. Envision it. And then, my friends, take that leap. Do yourself a favor. Show yourself self-love and go for it. Take the steps that are necessary and go for it. You came here to do what your soul, your spirit wants you to do, which is to soar. Like Wendy, Michael, John, and Peter. Soar and fly. You came here to soar. Soar like the eagles. Not be grounded on the ground like a lot of the pigeons or birds. I don't know. What are flightless birds? Is it ostriches? They bury their head in the sand. There you go. You didn't come here to bury your head and your soul and your spirit and your essence in the sand. You didn't come here to bury that shit. You came here to soar. Soar like an eagle. Soar and fly. So on that note, you know what I'm going to tell you? That's all I got to say. And we're only in chapter 3 and it's already like, come away, come away. I want to go away with them. I'm so glad I'm so glad I chose this book. So glad. Well, anyway, hope you're enjoying it. I hope you've gleaned something from this little pep talk, and I hope you enjoyed hearing this tale, and I will see you on the next episode. All right, everybody, have a good one. I forget what that's from. What show is that from? Not Beverly. Who's that guy? Benny Hill's show? I don't think it's that. Anyway, stay beautiful. Stay amazing. Take the leap of faith. Leap, and the net will appear. Peace.